and trembles, your will be done. A question like thunder rolls over the earth. Isn't anything too hard?
If you've been waiting on something, answers, healing, change, direction, Genesis 18 through 23 is going to feel uncomfortably personal because it really is about what faith looks like when time seems to stretch on and on and on, waiting for fulfilled promises and blessings. Welcome to Come Listen With Me. I'm Ricky Black, aka Elder Eliezer, and this is our Sunday preview of week 9 of our 2026 reading of the Old Testament. So, hopefully today we've had some discussions at church related to the reading this week that we've had go through back through week 8, where we're really looking at Abraham and some of his trials and everything that's going on. And introduction into Hagar as well, and really getting involved with what covenant looks like, about how God has nothing but our best interests in mind, right? And just how that covenant relationship works, where he is willing to take everything on himself, all the negatives, all the bad, because he knows that he's perfect and he won't break the covenant, but he doesn't want to let those negative things land on us, right? So he's going to take the brunt of them for us. And we also see that he cares about all peoples. Like, I think that's one of the misunderstandings about the Old Testament, is it seems to be so focused on Israel that it's like it's his only people that he really cares about. But we learned something in the last week, particularly through Ishmael and Hagar, which is that he is a covenant God who makes covenants with everyone, regardless if they're that chosen line of chosen people at all, because we're ultimately all his sons and daughters, and that covenant is open to all of us. So it's a beautiful week, and I hope you all got a lot out of it. But this week we're stepping into kind of one of the most famous questions in all of Scripture, right? It's a question that kind of asks right there at the edge of impossible, which is anything too hard for the Lord? And so it's going to be Genesis 18 through 23, and it's a set of stories that puts the question under pressure, right? In body, in city, in the family, the wilderness, and on the altar. And by the end of the week, you're going to feel what covenant faith actually cost, and also why it's still worth it, right? So it's a fantastic way we've got lined up. Now, if you've ever lived in a season where God's promises feel delayed, or where the gap between what you hope for and what you can see feels brutal, then this week is definitely for you. Because this section, it's not a highlight reel of perfect people. It's quite the opposite, right? It's covenant life in the real world, where there's faith and fear, miracles and mistakes, mercy and judgment, provision and grief. And through it all, the Lord keeps pressing the same question: is anything too hard for me? So let me give you a quick preview of what we'll be reading each day and what to watch for. So on Monday, it's going to be Genesis 18, right? The Lord visits Abraham and Sarah. There's a hospitality, divine encounter, and then the promise, right? Sarah will have a son. And Sarah actually laughs. Not the I'm happy laugh. It's the, there's no way that's going to happen laugh. And right there, the question hits: is anything too hard for the Lord? Then the chapter turns and Abraham begins his interceding for Sodom. And we see what faithful prayer can look like when it isn't polite and small talk, but bold and compassionate. Tuesday, we're going to be doing Genesis chapter 19. This one's heavier, right? It's one of the more difficult chapters in Genesis, right? Because we're dealing with Lot, the angels, the collapse of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then Lot's wife looking back and turning into a pillar of salt. So it's a chapter about hesitation and leaving behind what can't be saved, and about what it means to be delivered, right? Sometimes by mercy that, really has to pull you forward, kind of get you out of your state of, inertia. So on Wednesday, it's going to be Genesis chapters 20 up through chapter 21, verse 7. And this is really interesting because we're going to see how Abraham repeats an old mistake, right? Something he's already done with the Pharaoh, he's going to repeat with Abimelech. And it's just a reminder that even long faith journeys can include repeated weakness. So, hey, when we're reading that, if you ever feel like you keep stumbling on some of the same stumbling blocks, it's okay. It's okay, because even Father Abraham did. But even then, there's still miracles, right? Like right in the middle of stumbling, Isaac is born. And the promise is fulfilled after a long wait. It's 25 years for that promise that the Lord made with Abraham and Sarah before it finally is fulfilled. And that wait basically meant it was done under the most impossible of circumstances. So the story is going to force us to hold two truths together. God works with imperfect people, and God still keeps his word. Thursday is going to be Genesis 21, verses 8 through 12. And this is where, the conflict between Sarah and Hagar finally, Sarah and Hagar finally kind of blows up, right? Hagar and Ishmael, they're going to be sent off into the wilderness. And this is where I want you to pay close attention, right? It's going to be the whole God hears, God sees, and God provides. Not just for the covenant line, but for the outcast in the desert. And there's a tenderness in that chapter for the ones that people typically miss, right? It's painful, but it's also one of the clearest portraits of God's awareness of every soul and their need. It's also one that's really connected to one of the deep dives we did last week on Hagar's total story. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I highly recommend going and catching up with it, because it's a really interesting story that I think we gloss over too many times. And then Friday is going to be Genesis 22. It's going to be that whole mountaintop chapter where Abraham is commanded to offer up Isaac. And it isn't a chapter that you just skim, right? It's something that I think kind of sits with people. It's one of the stories I think we talk most about in Christianity. It's about promise, command, love, and surrender, and trusting in God when logic doesn't seem to add up, right? And at the center of all, it's also another part where the Lord will provide, right? Trusting in him that he will do that. And the final day reading on Saturday is going to be Genesis 23. This is kind of bittersweet. Sarah, after having lived a very long and fruitful life, she finally passes away, and Abraham purchases the cave of Machpelah for the burial place. And if you've ever wondered why Scripture spends time on land negotiations, well, this is why. Because faith isn't just about miracles. Faith is also what you do in grief, and it's what you do when you bury someone you love and still refuse to let go of hope. So it's still a great chapter. So there's a few threads to watch through the whole week, right? First is God's promise is bigger than human limitation. It doesn't matter about age, biology, timing, reputation, failure. None of it stops him, right? But we do have to wait for him to do it in his own time and method. A second thing to look for is deliverance is not the same as comfort. Sometimes God rescues with gentleness, and sometimes he rescues with urgency. And sometimes we're left in very difficult situations, but we're provided for in a way that we're going to come through it. And that situation is going to shape us and strengthen us. And third, God's care just reaches further than we expect, right? Hagar and Ishmael, they remind us that God is not indifferent to people in the margins. He hears, he sees, and he provides. And fourth is that faith matures when it's tested, right? Not tested to break you, it's tested to reveal what you trust when the outcome is completely out of your control. Also this week, I got a special something, right? I'm releasing the next song that pairs with the teaching. This one's entitled Nothing Too Hard, right? It's built around that question from Genesis 18, is anything too hard for the Lord? Musically, it's this electro-pop meets R&B feel. It's dark and addictive and has sort of a minimal production, hypnotic atmosphere. I don't know how to explain it, but it's the kind of track that's really just chill and laid back, right? And it still hits you in that way that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. At least it does for me whenever I'm listening to it. Honestly, it's one of my favorites. I know they say that about most of these songs that I'm writing and putting up here, but this one absolutely is in my favorite list on repeat. It's the kind of song I love throwing in the mix when I just want something calm but still weighty, right? And I hope it becomes a soundtrack for the week for you. Not just something you listen to, but I mean, something that helps you feel the question in your bones. Is anything too hard for the Lord? So here's the invitation for week 9. As you read, don't only ask what happened back then. Ask, where is that question aimed at me right now? Where do you feel like the promise is too late? Where do you feel like you've waited too long? Where do you feel stuck in a place that you should have left? And where do you feel alone in the wilderness? Where is God asking you to trust him with the thing that you want most to be in control? And then bring that question into prayer. Just something simple, honest, and direct. Lord, is anything too hard for you? Because that's what Genesis 18 through 23 shows us. It's that covenant faith isn't pretending that life is easy. It's anchoring your life to the God who can do what you cannot. So, all right, Genesis 18 through 23, week 9. We're going to talk about promise, intercession, judgment, mercy, wilderness provisions, and the kind of faith that can stand in tension, right, but not break. Come up to that line, but still hold fast. And don't forget, nothing too hard drops this week. Use it as your music anchor while you study. And tell me in the comments what stood out to you as you read or as you listen to the music. As always, thanks for being here. Now, this week, won't you come and spend a little time to come listen with me?
According to time, you cradle the sun. She laughs and trembles, your will be done. A question like thunder rolls over the earth. Isn't anything too hard? We count the years by empty rooms, but you count stars and call them soon. Is anything too hard?